Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 289. Shi Shengpeak. Visiting the old half as a ghost. The nightmare of the cultivation world had become even more prevalent in recent days. Zhenlong chess pieces spread like a plague through the world. The person behind the scenes was like a lunatic, not fussing over the chess pieces' identity at all. Be it an old man or a young child, they were all fair game. No one could guess what he was trying to do by spreading the net so wide. Someone mourned for help from the Tianyan pavilion, but the pavilion master suddenly declared that she would not be able to leave. Even if someone fled to starve to death in front of the Tianyan pavilion, the door would not open. Gradually, these people understood with great unwillingness, perhaps from the very beginning. They were wrong. But it was too late. Grandmaster Mo was dead, Chu Wanning's whereabouts were unknown, and the Shi Shengpeak was destroyed. The various sects were busy with their own affairs, and more Zhenlong chess pieces that had lost their reason wandered around the mortal world, committing murder and arson. It had already spread throughout the cultivation world at an alarming rate. Jiangdu, Yangzhou, Shizun, Leizhou. The sculptures and paintings of the buildings and the snow on the deck all emitted a dull lament under the scorching and blazing flames. The walls collapsed and the countless wind and moon were solemnly blown away under the tribulation of these flames. On the star observation platform of the Tianyan pavilion, Shi Mei was staring at the chaos near the mountains and rivers. He stood alone for a while before the faint sound of footsteps came from behind him. The woman's silk shoe stepped on the thin snow and covered it with his hands. "What about Taxi and June? He left this morning. You've sent him to do it? Why the hurry? There is no need to wait. I have already done all the preparations that needed to be done. The rest depends on him." After saying this sentence, after a long while, he opened his mouth again. His usually calm voice had a slight tremble to it. "Elder sister," he whispered to Mu Yanli, "after so many years, after 2 lifetimes, I finally managed to do it." Mu Yanli turned her head to the side and saw that his peach blossom eyes were glistening with moisture. He seemed extremely excited but also extremely aggrieved. The man closed his eyes and trembled uncontrollably. "Let's do this," he said in a low voice. "The portal is about to open. We'll take all the pieces we made and send them over there. All the chess pieces. All of them. But so many people." Mu Yanli's face was a bit pale, but when she saw the pained and excited expression on Shi Mei's face, she still firmly said, "All right, I understand." She turned around and left. Just as she was about to step off the edge of the star observation platform, Shi Mei suddenly called out to her, "Wait." She turned her head and saw that Shi Mei had turned sideways under the dim yellow sky. The strong wind was blowing against his cloak. He looked at Mu Yanli as if he wanted to say something, but his eyes were red and he stayed quiet. After a while she said, "Don't worry. Even if it's cruel, I won't betray you." Shi Mei suddenly closed his eyes. It seemed that he was always so sensitive and weak in critical moments. His voice trembled slightly as he said, "I have been betrayed by myself in this life." "He didn't betray you. He betrayed the entire clan, all of us. His hands are bloodless, but he has condemned us to hell ever since. I understand your helplessness. No matter what people say about you in this world," said Mu Yanli to Shi Mingjing. "In the clan of the Butterfly-Boned Beauty Feast, you are a well-deserved hero." He left. Shi Mei watched as her back gradually disappeared into the distance. Then, he turned around and placed his bony hand on the jade ornament. The cold feeling spread to his heart. "Hero." Shi Mei raised his head and looked at the dark clouds in the sky. After a long sigh, he said, "It's impossible for me to become one. There's no hero that carries such a heavy burden on their life." There seemed to be a moment of disappointment in his eyes, before it turned into ice. "I, Hua Binan, have spent 2 lifetimes in this struggle against heaven and earth. I do not believe that the heavens cannot be changed now that the demise of Shi Shengpeak, most of the Zhenlong chess pieces, these forbidden techniques are all in my hands. I would like to see who in this world can stop me. His knuckles were the color of jade. Forget about heroes. I just want a way out. His words scattered into the wind. For us. In the vast snowy region of Mount Kunlun, a black silhouette swiftly swept past. The wind was blowing like a knife across his cheek, but he could not seem to feel the cold in his narrowed, purplish eyes. He was flying like a hawk over a cliff. Jumping on top with light footstep, quick and agile. There were so many patrolling experts in Taxu Palace in the Kunlun Mountains, but no one noticed his arrival. The snow that he walked on didn't have a single trace on it. Very quickly, this man arrived at the highest point of the Taxu Palace. From here, he could see the snow-covered Wangmu Lake. It was misty and tranquil, filled with mist. The lightning-fast black figure stopped. The man stood at the summit of Mount Kunlun, straight as a bayonet, his dark eyes fixed on the surface of the lake. The wind picked up, blowing away his cloak, revealing a handsome face that was pale and devoid of blood. It was Taxian Jun. After going through the second tempering, he now had Grandmaster Mo's spiritual core and had regained his strength as strong as it was in the past and will no longer disobey the orders of the master. He finally became the killing blade and spiritual energy source that made Shimei completely satisfied. However, ever since he awakened in the Tianyan Pavilion, Taxian Jun's mind would be filled with scattered fragments. Previously, he had always thought that he hated Chu Wanning, that he loved Shimei and that his feelings for him were related to these two. However, he vaguely felt that something was wrong. Recently, he would often hear a vague voice and see some vague images. He saw Chu Wanning carefully wrapping the wontons in Menpo Hall and heard himself say to Chu Wanning, "Shizun, can we start over again? Please, just pay attention to me, all right." He saw a crescent moon hanging over the sea cliff, shining only on the two of them. He held Chu Wanning's hand tightly while Chu Wanning kept his head down. His usually fierce eyes were moist and red. He heard Chu Wanning say to him, "I'm not good. I've never been loved by anyone before." He saw him and Chu Wanning sleeping on the bed of the inn. The weather outside was heavy, but it hasn't affected them. He saw Chu Wanning lift up the curtain of his eyelashes and look at him. Suddenly, his heart palpitated. Taxian Jun suddenly opened his eyes. "What are these?" He saw Chu Wanning looking at him with that kind of gentle gaze. That kind look in his eyes was never level at him again after he had tortured him with an aphrodisiac, humiliated him and detained him. Taxian Jun felt his head hurt. He raised his hand and the light of day shone upon the cold spikes on his wrists. He rubbed his forehead and cursed softly, "What nonsense is this?" He stood on the roof for a moment, stunned. It was snowing heavily in Mount Kunlun and soon, it was covered in frost. He was slightly surprised, because deep in his heart, he felt that this was also good. It was like a good dream, and yet he felt at peace because of the gentle gaze Chu Wanning gave him. This venerable one has gone crazy. He blinked his eyes, pushed these ridiculous thoughts to the back of his mind, and moved on. Shimei's order was for him to go to Mount Kunlun, where the spirit energy was most concentrated and completely opened the gate to his other life. So he should go north. However, when he saw the heavenly lake, he couldn't help but circle around it. That was the place where he forever lost Chu Wanning. Taxian Jun stood in place for a while, but in the end, he couldn't help but walk in that direction in a daze. However, just as he was passing by a nearby veranda, he suddenly heard a familiar voice. "Father! Mother!" This voice was very familiar. He suddenly stopped in his tracks and hid himself in the shadows, revealing a pair of pitch-black eyes as he looked down. Then he saw who was it clearly and couldn't help but sneer. "I was wondering who it was. So it was you." In that courtyard, there was only Xuemeng. Xuemeng was holding a jug of wine as he leaned against the table. He was already drunk. This time, your parents weren't killed by me. Taxi and Jun enjoyed Xuemeng's drunken state with great interest as he stroked his chin. But when you are sad, I am very happy. I haven't forgotten who made a hole in my chest before. How is it? Isn't the feeling of heartache great? The courtyard was quiet and no one else was present. Taxi and Jun stared down at the ground for a while. Suddenly, he made up his mind. With a flash of his black shadow, he arrived in front of Xuemeng. The drunk phoenix did not notice his arrival and continued to caress the pot of wine, wanting to drink the nectar within it again. Suddenly, a cold hand reached out and grabbed the red clay pot, stopping his movements. You. Who? Guess. Xuemeng forced open one of his eyes that was swollen from crying and sleepily looked up along that hand. His handsome face was filled with mockery. Taxi and Jun had never seen Xuemeng in such a depressed state. Even though he believed that Xuemeng had secretly collapsed many times after he died, this was the first time he saw it. He licked his lips and felt very excited. He bent over and stared at Xuemeng as if he was staring at a prey. Interesting. It turns out that the disciple that Chu Wanning was most proud of would get drunk and turn into a pile of mud. As he spoke, he sat diagonally on the edge of the stone table and then raised Xuemeng's chin. It's been a long time since I've seen you when you were this young. After staying in the mortal world for so long, I have almost forgotten what kind of domineering face you had when you were a youth. His fingertips gently caressed it. He brushed his cheeks, the bridge of his nose and the space between his eyebrows, then poked his forehead in a manner that was neither light nor heavy. Xuemeng, do you know? There is one thing that I am actually quite regretful about. He looked at Xuemeng's startled eyes and gradually revealed a smile that would cause chills. In my other life, I was kind enough to let you live, but you wanted to kill me instead. Sometimes I think, shouldn't I have killed you in the first place? Humans are supposed to be comfortable living, but those who die might not be in pain. Taxi and Jun's voice was low and gloomy. Xuemeng, do you want to accompany your parents? As he spoke, he bent down. His cold breath brushed against Xuemeng's cheek and his two cold fingers even touched the artery on the side of Xuemeng's neck. All this time, he had been staring into Xuemeng's eyes. He looked at his reflection in those hazy, teary eyes, like a ghost that had descended into the world. In truth, everyone living in this world will die in the end. You and I are brothers for half our lives after all. Since I met you here, why don't I send you off first to help you escape? He exerted force with his fingers and was about to kill Tang Ji. Suddenly, a whisper, like a sprout breaking through the earth, could be heard. Taxi and Jun was startled. As Xuemeng looked at him, he seemed to be able to distinguish the appearance of the person in front of him amidst his drunkenness. His teary clothes made him stagger to his feet as he choked with sobs. Tang Ji, he called to him. He only knew that the person in front of him was Mo Ran, that he was his elder brother, that his family who was most carefree and jovial youth that had finally returned. This time, Taxi and Jun heard it clearly, and he was sure that he didn't hear wrongly. Thus, he was somewhat astonished, and his face unexpectedly did not know what sort of expression to wear. His brain was in chaos again. In a blur, an image flashed past Taxi and Jun through his eyes. He saw himself and Xuemeng sitting in the Red Lotus Pavilion, brewing tea and brewing wine. Under the moonlight, they clinked cups. Was this what that Grand Master Mo did again? Tang Ji. At first, Xuemeng was still trying his best to hold back his sobs, but in the end, he sobbed and choked on his words, which eventually turned into a wail of grief. Don't go. Don't leave me behind. After a while, he seemed to have thought of something else and his entire body suddenly started to tremble. His lips were green and white. Don't kill my father, don't force them. I was the one who killed those people. Don't hurt my parents, just come at me. Large teardrops rolled down, dampening Taxi and Jun's chest. Don't. Don't dig out my brother's chest. Amidst this heaving sob, Taxian Jun slowly lowered his hand. He stood there stiffly for a moment, wanting to push Xuemeng away. But Xuemeng held him so tightly that his hands and feet were locked in place. Gradually, the area closest to his heart was soaked with tears. In the end, Taxian Jun wanted to run like the wind and dashed up the roof rafters. He lowered his body on the porch and looked at Xuemeng, who was hugging his knees and crying in the snow. The Xuemeng in his memory had always been fierce, arrogant, aggressive, sharp, and harsh. However, the child that was left in the snow and wind was the one who could no longer find his brother. He looked at Xuemeng standing there, crying for a very long time. Afterwards, Xuemeng stood up, either because he had woken up from his drinking stupor or because he was tired from crying. He stood blankly in the courtyard for a while, then carried the wine jug towards the depths of the plum blossom. The young man walked aimlessly, his mind in a trance, slowly walking away. Taxian Jun looked at the snowy ground. There were 2 lines of twisted footprints, but he no longer turned his head back. He continued to travel deeper into the snowstorm until he could no longer see Xuemeng's back. In the wind, there was a sudden and powerful singing. It was a short song Xue Zhenyang had sung before he died. Now, it flowed out of Xuemeng's throat and echoed through the Taxia Palace in Mount Kunlun. I pay my respects to an old friend like a ghost. Only in this drunken state do I have a chance to get along with each other. A voice rang out. It was still young, but it had already become ancient. Under the main horn of the mountain, it has already decayed. The snow had dyed the young man's black hair. That hoarse voice, mixed with the sound of the wind and snow, was filled with desolation. Heaven's light dream shatters everything in the distance. It was getting further and further away. Or perhaps it was not Xuemeng who had walked far away, but the young man finally sobbed, each word choked with sobs. Abandon my old body. Give up my old body. He was only 22 years old, but only in his drunken dreams could he see his old friends laughing and seeing each other again. He was only in his prime, but he could only see a pot of dukang, Gao Tang's love, and 2 or 3 old friends. Xuemeng raised his head, as if he was trying to hold back the tears in the corner of his eyes. However, he did not know whether he had held back. The snowstorm had already blinded him. He closed his eyes and let out a long howl. It was as if he was kowtowing to the heavens and crying out to the earth. We are willing to extend our lifespan to Dukjo. Let him carry the wine, and we will return it. As the clouds gathered, he dropped the wine jar in his hand. Spreading his hands, Xuemeng fell straight into the snow. He didn't want to go any further. What was in front of him? Everywhere was a world of ice and snow. There were no more familiar figures, no more homes. Even though he had dreamt of Moran just now, it was all fake. It was all just a reflection of the moon in the water, fading away in the blink of an eye. Xuemeng lay in the snow. After a while, he raised his hand and covered his eyes. His thin, blood-red lips slightly parted as hot tears flowed down his cheeks. Why did you all leave, leaving me alone? Xuemeng suddenly choked and lost his tone. Why is that? Why did you leave me alone? In fact, he had lived 2 lifetimes and in the end, he was the only one left. Taxian Jun listened to the lingering sound of the howling wind as it swallowed him up. He looked towards the direction where Xuemeng had disappeared to. He stood there motionlessly on the roof while the wind blew against his cloak, fluttering it. He raised his hand and touched his chest, not knowing what to feel. I worship half of my old friend as a ghost. This was true for Xuemeng, but wasn't it also true for Taxian Jun? In his previous life, Wushan Hall was completely empty. In the end, he was the only one left and no one else was there. He did not know where the incense burner in his room had once been, nor how did he wear the clothes he had worn as a teenager. Sometimes he would blurt out a joke when he was trying to study, but everyone around him was respectful and tense. No one knew what he was talking about, no one understood him. Those who knew him were either in the underworld or at the ends of the earth. Taxi and June slowly came to the edge of the heavenly lake. The weather was bad, the distant fog was thick, and the snow seeds on the pond were flowing rapidly. He stood there without a sound, like a heartless, unfeeling statue of wood. He allowed the frost to cover him. Chu Wanning. He sighed softly, if only. What if it was back then? He did not continue. His eyelashes were folded and his eyes were closed. In the past, there had never been anything like this. If he was the cultivation emperor, then no one in the cultivation world would have been able to compare to him. He did not know what regret was, what turning back was. What happened had happened. He did not regret it and he did not admit defeat. Even if it was a mess of flesh and blood, even if he had to abandon the traitors, this was the path he had chosen. Even if it was filled with thorns, he would still force himself to continue walking. However, in the vast sky, in the middle of the snowy sky, in a place that no one would ever be able to see or know about. After standing there with his hands behind his back for a long time, he finally did something unexpected. He knelt down. At the place where Chu Wanning died in battle, he kowtowed for a long time. He bowed. A second bow. He kowtowed 3 times. Taxi and June raised his head. Under his cloak, his eyelashes were frosted over and his expression was solemn. No one knew what he was thinking about. He then stood up, as if he had fulfilled a wish he had for many years. Without a word, he moved his cloak and robe, heading towards where there was the most abundant spiritual energy in Mount Kunlun. Since Taxi and June has gone out, no one in the world could stop him. Shi Mingjing had chosen the right one. He possessed the strongest and most powerful spiritual energy in the world and a formidable cultivation base that was unrivaled. The gate of time and space, life and death was about to be opened. End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 290. Shi Shengpeak. 2 cold plums blooming on one stem. Xuemeng lay on the ground. When he was drunk, he was confused and completely unaware that he had just met the greatest devil in the world. He was still lying on his back in the snow. The snow on the peak of Mount Kunlun was still drifting down, like the willow leaves on a spring day. The autumn reeds covered him. After an unknown amount of time had passed, someone approached from within the snow, holding a bright red paper umbrella. Xuemeng squinted his eyes, and then he saw a clear and cold face. Mei. Xuemeng mumbled the 2 words, "Hanks you." He was too tired. It's me. Mei Hangxiu didn't say much and helped him up from the ground. Xuemeng lay on Mei Hangxiu's shoulder, but he did not leave. Instead, he asked, "Do you have any wine?" Mei Hangxiu said, "No." Xuemeng acted as if he didn't hear anything. "All right, all right, all right. Then why don't you have a drink with me?" "Nope." Xuemeng was silent for a moment, then laughed. "Look at you, you dog. I didn't drink before, but now that I do, you won't give me any. Are you messing with me? I don't like alcohol." Xuemeng muttered a few more sentences. It sounded as if he was cursing someone. Then he pushed away Mei Hangxiu and walked into the snow. Mei Hangxiu was holding onto an umbrella as he looked at his slightly hunched back. Instead of chasing after him, he asked, "Where are you going?" He did not know where he was going. He only hated the fact that he had not drunk enough wine to kill himself. Mei Hangxiu replied, "There is no way back." Xuemeng suddenly stopped moving and stood there blankly. After a while, he suddenly burst into tears, "I just fucking want a drink. You won't even let me drink. If you don't drink, then don't drink, and you lied when you said you don't like alcohol. Are you even human? I didn't lie to you." Xuemeng did not take it in at all as he wailed, "Are you guys human? I'm not feeling good, Can't you see that? Mei Hangxiu said, yes. Xuemeng stared blankly for a moment, and then felt even more wronged. Even the tip of his nose had turned red. Fine, fine, fine. Even if you can tell, you won't drink with me. Are you afraid that I won't give you money for the drink? I tell you, I'm not that poor. He went to his pocket and actually mumbled something. He took out a pile of broken coins and counted them back and forth a few times. Mei Hangxiu stroked his forehead, his head obviously hurting. Xuemeng, you're drunk. You should rest first. Before Xuemeng could reply, the sound of rustling footsteps came from behind him. Another gentle voice sounded out, Gag, why are you arguing with a drunk person? With that, a hand with a silk sheath reached out, carrying a sheepskin bag and a silver bell on his wrist. Mei Hangxiu glanced back. Behind him stood a man who looked exactly the same as him. However, the smile on his face was deep and his expression was extremely gentle. Actually, there are only two ways to deal with drunkards. The man grinned. Concuss him or knock him out. Mei Hangxiu. As the man spoke, he winked at Mei Hangxiu and said, I know you don't drink. You can go back and I'll drink with him. Light green smoke curled up into the air. It was graceful, supple, and full of love. However, the smoke was everywhere else. Then room of the eldest Shikshan of Taxiu Palace was filled with the rich, expensive fragrance of ambergris. This place was covered with a white, fluffy carpet and every step of the way, one of the steps went straight up to one's ankles. Mei Hangxiu was sitting on the white carpet with his bare feet and his head in his hands. His jade-white toes casually rubbed against each other as his jade-like eyes stared at Xuemeng, who was sitting cross-legged in front of him and gulping down the wine. After 30 minutes of drinking, Mei Hangxiu smiled and asked, Hey, Ziming, aren't you surprised? Surprised about what? That there were two of us. Xuemeng. Oh. Mei Hangxiu shook his head. I forgot that your alcohol tolerance is very low. After you get drunk, your brain is probably different from an ordinary person's, so there's nothing that could surprise you. Xuemeng, humph. I don't know if you've noticed, but that day at the Shisheng Peak, the person who helped you and blocked the sword was my big brother. I can't remember. Mei Hangxiu said, You've seen his weapon, Xiaofeng. A sword made of silver black iron. Xuemeng frowned and thought hard. But on that day in the Loyalty Hall, the person who held him had an ugly expression. The weapon wasn't silver, either. It's blue. Because he was angry that day and he was very anxious, so he put the elixir into it. He doesn't usually pay attention to his spiritual energy, but my brother doesn't really like to be cruel. We actually use that sword differently. My spiritual core is of wood and water element while his spiritual core is of water and fire element. When the time comes, you will see that there were 3 types of spiritual currents in it, green, red and blue, but he did not continue, because Xuemeng did not seem too interested in this matter. After hearing half of it, Xuemeng began to drink his wine, his expression indifferent. Mei Hangxiu narrowed his eyes. He suddenly felt that Xuemeng's appearance was not like his usual domineering attitude but instead carried a trace of coldness. This coldness made Xuemeng seem not like himself, but rather like another person. But who? Mei Hangxiu did not think about it for a while and he was too lazy to ponder much about it. His work had always been done in the same way that the brainless golden beast breathed out, lazily drifting about wherever it went, seemingly without any bones. Xuemeng drank another bag of sheepskin and then asked Mei Hangxiu, Do you have any more of this wine? Yes, but you've already drunk too much. You can't ask for more. Xuemeng said, I won't get drunk from 1,000 cups. Are you sick? However, he still handed the wine to him and said warmly before he left, This is the last one. If I give this to you again and my brother found out about it, he'll cut me alive. Xuemeng slowly drank his wine, his expression very cold. It was not like the usual Xuemeng. While drinking, Xuemeng suddenly whispered, "You have a brother." "Ah." Mei Hangxiu laughed. "I've been talking about him for a long time now and you only comprehended it now." Xuemeng's eyes were a little unfocused. His eyelashes were long like a butterfly resting on the ground. He then muttered, "I also have a brother." "Yeah, I know." Leaning against the beam column, Xuemeng crossed his legs. After sitting for a long time, he felt a little numb. He stretched out one of his legs and stared at Mei Hangxiu for a while. Suddenly, the ice-cold expression on his face disappeared and was replaced by a dazzling brilliance. However, under this radiance, Xuemeng still did not seem like Xuemeng at all. He smiled and asked, "Hey, how does your brother treat you?" Mei Hangxiu was surprised by his sudden change in attitude. Is this how this man was when drunk? But he still said, "Pretty good." "Ha ha ha, you sure are gentle with your words." "What do you mean by pretty good? Would he forge a weapon for you or would he cook you a bowl of noodles when you were sick?" Mei Hangxiu smiled. "Nothing like that, but he would help me when I need to keep a woman off my back." Xuemeng. "I don't really like seeing old lovers cry. The things I can't handle, he will do for me. He did a lot more than I could. He could be cold and very straightforward, but he doesn't know how to have much fun, so he's even too old to hold a girl's hand." Xuemeng wrinkled his nose. "What's your brother's name?" "Mei Hangxiu." "Like you. The words are different." He smiled. "He is standoffish. He deserves his reputation." Xuemeng mumbled, "Why did you do this?" Mei Hangxiu replied, "It's convenient to do things like this. For some things, it's not strange for two people to do it. However, if others think that it was done by one person, then they would feel that it's very mysterious. The palace master allowed us to do things like this, so he has been bringing me and Geg along since we were young." As he spoke, he opened the lid of the incense burner, picked up the silver spoon and began to fiddle with the remaining embers inside. He then poured in some spices which were able to calm the mind and dispel the cold. His voice was very soft. "He and I have been carrying human skin masks with us. When he puts them on, I will show them my true appearance. When I put them on, he will act as his real self, and in a flash, more than 20 years has gone by just like this. Didn't you get tired of it?" "Not at all. It's pretty fun." Mei Hangxiu smiled. "But my brother must be tired of it. He always says that I owe too much debt outside, that he even has to walk around those female cultivators." Xuemeng had never experienced the feeling of being surrounded by female cultivators. In fact, he felt that he was about the same age as Mei Hangxiu. He had not even touched a woman's hand before. However, there was nothing to show off about this sort of thing. He drank dryly, silently, not uttering a word. Mei Hangxiu had thought that he was drunk and that his brain was abnormal. But unexpectedly at this time, Xuemeng suddenly asked him, "Why did you save me?" The tone changed again, this time very gently. This kind of gentleness appeared on Xuemeng's face in a way that was far too out of place. It was even more piercing than his previous brilliance. Mei Hangxiu finally could not stand it any longer. He sat up and raised his hand that was tied to the silver bell. He turned Xuemeng's chin left and right as he looked, saying, "Strange, it's you." "Yes, it's you, but different. What's going on?" Xuemeng did not struggle at all and allowed him to pull his face and be analyzed. His pair of black eyes quietly looked at Mei Hangxiu, and after a while, he asked, "Why are you helping the Shi Shengpeak? Are we that close?" "Not really. I played with you when I was little, but one day it was me and one day it was my brother who played with you. In fact, I've only been with you for about 10 days. Then why are you willing to take me in?" Mei Hangxiu sighed. He extended a slender finger and poked Xuemeng's forehead, Your mother and father saved my mother's life before. She's from Shattered Leaf City and Shattered Leaf has a lot of evil spirits. After she gave birth to us brothers, she sent us to the Taxia Palace in Mount Kunlun. Afterwards, there was chaos in the city and heavy casualties. The new incense has a sharp scent of cedar. Mei Hangxiu smiled. After a long and arduous journey, she didn't have any money left. By the time she reached the foot of Mount Kunlun, she was already dying. His expression was still very gentle and between his forehead, there were red droplets of water that were shining. At that time, it was Uncle Shui and Aunt Wang's first visit to the Taxia Palace in Kunlun. They saw my dying mother but they did not ask about her background, did not ask for money but only took the best medicines to treat her. After finding out that she was here to search for her son, they even carried her on their backs to Mount Kunlun. Shuemeng was speechless for a moment as he blankly listened. After a long while, he asked, "Then what happened to your mother?" "She was too sick." Mei Hangxiu shook his head, "There's no way to get her back from heaven so she left. But thanks to uncle and aunt, we've seen her for one last time." Outside, a little wind blew in. The smoke in the room dispersed, and the wind chimed in from the corner of the eaves. It was like the sound of water. All these years, aunt and uncle have always said that there is no need to say anything. It was just a simple gesture. In the end, they even forgot about it themselves but my brother and I still remember it. Mei Hangxiu raised his jade eyes and looked at him peacefully. Too much time had passed, and when he talked about it, the pain was invisible and only gentleness showed. That day, it was Uncle Shui who carried my mother on his back, while Aunt Wang held an umbrella by his side. They were afraid that my mother would suffer from another cold. The first thing Aunt and Uncle said after entering the hall was not to do business on behalf of Shi Shangpeak or to form an alliance or make friends with the Taxia Palace. They asked if there was a pair of twins from Shattered Leaf City. His light golden eyelashes drooped down, covering the clear pool of water. To be honest, they are the most outstanding sect leader and sect madam that I have ever seen in my entire life. Shuemeng choked with sobs. My parents. Mei Hangxiu answered, yes, your parents. Shuemeng buried his face into his palm. His shoulders trembled slightly. He was crying again. It seemed that all the tears in his life were about to run out in these few months of crisis. He cried. Shuemeng finally returned to his normal appearance. At this moment, Mei Hangxiu suddenly remembered. Just now when he had coldly said, I'm not drunk, that was Chu Wanning. When he brightly asked, do you have a brother too? It was Mo Weiyu. When he said softly, why did you save me? That was Shi Mingjing. He was trying, clumsily to remember their faces, the bits and pieces of them, their glances, their smiles, their sitting or standing, their anger or annoyance. In the past, he was used to having Chu Wanning's cold stubbornness, Mo Weiyu's scorching heat and Shi Mingjing's gentleness. In the past, he had a Shizun, a cousin and even a close friend. Suddenly, a night of rain and duckweed. Mountains and rivers shattered and the wind blew. The rain had stopped and he was alone. They all disappeared. Shuemeng alone drank a jug of turbid wine. After that, he became three people by himself. He cried, laughed, blew cold and hot, then gentled. He liked and respected them in his own awkward ways. He thought that perhaps he didn't express it well. His love for his Shizun always seemed to be very dull. His fondness for his cousin was always sharp. His love for Shimei was always very indifferent. After he finished drinking, Shuemeng slowly curled himself up. He had shrunk to such a small size and his eyes were red. He said, it's my fault. What I did was wrong. Come back. I am no longer arrogant, no longer proud, no longer hesitant, no longer indifferent. Shuemeng sobbed, his forehead pressed against his knees as his entire body trembled. As he sobbed, he said, come back. Don't leave me alone. If he could return to his old friend, if he could start all over again. He did not want the reputation of the darling of the heaven, nor did he want the pride of the young master of Shizun Peak. He just wanted to tell them directly and passionately. I really, really love you. I can't do without you. I want all my life to have to do with you. He was willing to use his spiritual core, and he was willing to pay 1,000 gold coins. Willing to give it all. To see the deceased all gathered together and look at them greedily, even if it's only for a while. Mei Hangxiu sighed as he saw him grieve. He raised his hand and touched his ears. He was about to say something when he heard a muffled sound. It was like thunder had crashed through heavy clouds and the earth was shaking. The tremors continued for a while, as if there was a giant beast awakening in the depths of the snowy plains. It was as if it could release its breath at any time and swallow the sun and the moon. Mei Hangxiu knew that something was wrong. He settled down Shuemeng and was about to go out when he saw his brother holding his sword, pushing aside the veil and striding in. His elder brother's expression was solemn and extremely gloomy as he said, "Immediately go to the main hall." Mei Hangxiu was stunned. What's wrong? What was that just now? His elder brother, who was usually cold, pursed his lips and said, "A huge mysterious formation has appeared in the northeast. I'm afraid Grandmaster Mo is right. The gate of time and space, life and death is about to open." End chapter.